In the early months of 1942, the Pacific Ocean belonged to Japan. American battleships lay burning in Pearl Harbor. U.S. forces were retreating across Asia. And in Washington, the question was no longer how to win, but how to survive. Then, one American admiral made a decision so dangerous, so aggressive, that many believed it bordered on madness. He ordered his fleet straight into Japanese-controlled waters, not to fight, but to gamble everything on a secret plan that, if it failed, could end America's ability to strike back at all. This is the hidden story of Admiral William "Bull" Halsey's most dangerous move, the gamble that cleared the path for one of the most audacious missions of World War II. The Doolittle Raid. December 1941 shattered the illusion of American security. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor killed over 2,400 Americans and crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet. In a matter of hours, the balance of power in the Pacific collapsed. In the weeks that followed, Japan swept through Southeast Asia like a storm. Hong Kong fell. Singapore collapsed. The Philippines were crushed. Wake Island, Guam, and countless smaller bases vanished behind enemy lines. Everywhere, Japanese naval power seemed unstoppable. Morale inside the United States plummeted. Newspapers carried daily reports of defeat. Families stared at maps, watching red pins creep closer toward Australia, and perhaps one day, America itself. President Franklin Roosevelt knew something drastic had to be done. America needed a victory. Or at least, the appearance of one. Something bold. Something shocking. Something that would prove Japan was not untouchable. That is when an unlikely plan was born, to launch American bombers directly at the Japanese home islands. It sounded impossible. But at the center of this plan stood one man who thrived on impossible missions. Admiral William Frederick Halsey, Jr. William Halsey was not subtle. He swore. He smoked. He drove his ships hard. And he believed the only proper response to enemy aggression was overwhelming violence. His sailors called him Bull Halsey, a nickname earned through relentless attacks and fearless leadership. Where other admirals calculated risks, Halsey embraced them. After Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt needed a commander who could do more than defend. He needed someone who would strike back. And so, Halsey was given command of America's most precious remaining assets. Its aircraft carriers. With battleships destroyed, carriers became the backbone of U.S. naval power. Losing them would mean losing the war. Yet Halsey believed carriers were not meant to hide. They were meant to hunt. In February 1942, barely 2 months after Pearl Harbor, Halsey took his task force straight into the heart of enemy territory, raiding Japanese bases across the Marshall and Gilbert Islands. The attacks were small in scale, but psychologically, they were explosive. For the first time, Japan felt vulnerable. And Halsey was just getting started. Inside Washington, a radical idea was circulating. Army Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle proposed launching land-based bombers from an aircraft carrier, something never done before. 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers would take off from a carrier, strike Tokyo and other major cities, then continue onward to airfields in China. The mission offered little chance of survival. Most of the crews expected to crash land, ditch at sea, or be captured. But the psychological impact could be enormous. The problem: to reach Japan, the carrier force would have to sail deep into enemy-controlled waters, passing through patrol zones thick with submarines, reconnaissance aircraft, and picket boats. If discovered too early, the carriers could be destroyed before launching a single plane. That is where Halsey entered the picture. Instead of sneaking in quietly, Halsey proposed something far more dangerous. A violent, aggressive push that would draw Japanese attention away from the true objective. It would look reckless. It would look like a direct challenge. But in reality, it was a calculated deception. In April 1942, Task Force 16 slipped into the Pacific. At its heart were two carriers. USS Hornet, carrying Doolittle's bombers. USS Enterprise, providing air cover. Halsey knew the Japanese had layered defenses. Submarines patrolled the outer zones. Scout planes flew long-range searches. Picket boats drifted far from the homeland, acting as floating tripwires. Discovery was almost certain. So Halsey did something counterintuitive. Instead of hugging remote routes, he drove his fleet directly toward Japanese shipping lanes, increasing the chances of detection.
Why?
Because if Japanese patrols spotted an American carrier force advancing boldly, they would assume it was another hit-and-run raid, like Halsey's earlier attacks. They would scramble fighters and surface fleets to intercept. And in doing so, they would pull defensive assets away from Tokyo itself. It was bait. High-risk bait. Every mile closer increased the danger. Every hour raised the chance that Japanese submarines could slip into torpedo range. Sailors slept beside anti-aircraft guns. Pilots waited in ready rooms, knowing a single radio call could mean full combat at any moment. Then, on April 18th, the worst happened. A Japanese picket boat spotted the American fleet. Radio transmissions crackled. The alarm was out. Tokyo would soon know. The fleet was still hundreds of miles from the planned launch point. Launching now meant bombers would lack fuel. Many crews would not reach China. Survival chances would plummet. But waiting meant annihilation. Halsey turned to Doolittle. Launch planes. To Colonel Doolittle and gallant command, good luck and God bless you. One by one, the massive B-25 bombers roared down the pitching carrier deck. Waves smashed against the hull. Pilots fought violent winds. Each takeoff balanced on the edge of catastrophe. Yet every plane lifted successfully into the gray morning sky. 16 bombers vanished toward Japan. Behind them, Halsey spun his carriers around and fled at full speed, racing to escape inevitable counterattack. The gamble had worked. Japanese civilians looked up in disbelief as American bombers thundered overhead. Explosions ripped through factories, shipyards, and military bases. Though physical damage was limited, the psychological impact was devastating. For the first time, Japan's sacred homeland had been violated. Air raid sirens wailed across Tokyo. Military leaders were stunned. How had American bombers reached the heart of the empire? The myth of Japanese invincibility shattered in a single morning. Yet the cost was brutal. Many crews crash-landed in China. Some drowned at sea. 8 airmen were captured. 3 would be executed. But their sacrifice reshaped the war. The raid triggered panic inside Japan's high command. Defensive resources were pulled back from frontline operations to guard the home islands. Most importantly, Japanese leaders accelerated a risky plan to eliminate American carriers once and for all. That decision led directly to the Battle of Midway, where Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers and the momentum of the war forever. And behind that chain reaction stood Halsey's gamble. His aggressive push had masked the raid, distracted Japanese patrols, created confusion, and bought precious minutes for Doolittle's bombers. What looked like reckless bravado was strategic brilliance. Admiral Halsey never sought credit. But without his audacious gamble, the Doolittle Raid might never have happened. In the darkest months of World War II, when defeat seemed inevitable, Halsey reminded America, and the world, that courage, risk, and bold leadership could still change destiny. His gamble lit a spark. a spark that burned through Tokyo and ignited the long road to victory.